I'm going to finish off reading Chapter 9, Part 3, on page 205. New ideas. People from Parks Canada met and talked with the group. The opinions of the group prompted the government to change its decision. Parks Canada decided to keep the visitor center going. In fact, almost $3 million would be spent on fixing up the center and improving the site. Hearing about new programs got me thinking. Adults plan the educational activities for museums and visitor centers. However, children often have different interests from adults. How can adults find out what children would find interesting and useful? How can children have input in what is being planned for them? Having input on changes. When filling in comment cards, I often just write that I like the display or activity. I'll try to be more specific next time. For example, I could have written how much I liked watching the David Thompson puppet show put on by my friends of the Rocky Mountain House National Historic Site. If Parks Canada knows how great their puppet shows are, maybe they will organize more. I can phone, write, or email suggestions about things that would be of help and interest to children. Children have lots of ideas for hands-on activities. When groups are formed to work on plans, I will try to participate so children's ideas are heard. I will encourage my friends to contribute too. So it is important that children's ideas are heard. So you can have a voice in many ways. So this passage here tells you many ways that you can contribute your voice. You have something to say. You can phone, write, or email suggestions, and filling in comment cards, if that interests you. Joining together. How did Fort Edmonton begin? Over time, competition for furs between the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company increased. The fur traders from the Northwest Company moved further and further west, across what is now Alberta. The Hudson's Bay Company men also did the same. Each company was trying to get a bigger share of the fur trade. Both companies also established a string of trading forts. They began to offer more trade goods to the First Nations people for furs. They also offered gifts to encourage them to trade with their company rather than their rival. They needed more and more traders to compete. The profits for each company started to drop. In 1821, the two companies decided to join together and call themselves the Hudson's Bay Company. So eventually, after many years of competition between the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company, in the end, they decided to join into one company and call themselves the Hudson's Bay Company. So if you look at this map here, it's titled Fur Trade Posts and Forts in 1821. So this is before the companies joined. You can see the squares on this map represent the Hudson's Bay Company posts. The circles represent the Northwest Company posts, and the triangle represent other posts. After this time, all these posts became part of the Hudson's Bay Company because when the companies joined, they called themselves the Hudson's Bay Company. Fort Edmonton. The Hudson's Bay Company built the first Fort Edmonton in 1795. 5 years later, a new supply of furs was needed. The fort was moved to a new location along the river. It was moved 3 more times before the last Fort Edmonton was built sometime between 1825 and 1831. The new fort was located on the bank of the North Saskatchewan River. For defense, it had a stockade, cannons, and huge gates. This historic illustration shows Fort Edmonton as it was in 1860. So you can see the gates around it, the stockades, in the picture. The fort was a place to live and a business center. Tradesmen at the fort made needed items such as furniture, tools, and York boats. York boats were large wooden rowboats designed for shallow rivers. They could carry 8 to 10 men and large quantities of goods. Furs, pemmican, and fresh or dried buffalo were carried downriver from Fort Edmonton in spring. The journey to York Factory took 6 weeks. Once there, trade goods were loaded. The return journey was upriver and against the current. It took 3 to 4 months of heavy pulling and rowing upstream to return to Fort Edmonton. So this caption here on the side, on the right side, what might the voyageurs have done when the rivers were too shallow or too dangerous for the York boats? Why do you think the York boats did not last longer? So that's something to think about. Trading at Fort Edmonton. When First Nations people came to the fort, they entered through a small door into a trading room. All the furs were examined. They were compared to a made beaver. This was a top quality beaver skin that had to be so thick you could not see a person's hand moving through the fur. The width of 5 open hands, a dark brown color, and free from extra holes. Each fur was given a worth of a certain number of made beaver. 2 poor quality beaver skins or 2 otter pelts might be worth 1 made beaver. When the value of the skins was added up, trading could continue. A gun might be worth 14 made beaver. Wool blankets had black stripes on the side. These stripes were signs of the size, weight, and quality of the blanket. Their made beaver value usually depended on their thickness and quality. If a trapper did not get goods for all his made beaver, he was given tokens. Tokens were like money and could be used at a later date. Workers. Different jobs at the trading post were considered to be of different importance. So as you can see a pyramid here, and it shows the different jobs and the different importance. So the chief factor is at the top of the pyramid. This was the most important job. But on the bottom here, you can see the laborers, which make up a huge portion of the jobs at the trading posts, were the foundation for the pyramid. So these people, laborers, voyageurs, cooks, gardeners, and servants were very important. But the chief was of most importance. Okay. Skilled tradesmen were next. These are people who are coopers or barrel makers, blacksmiths, worked with hot metal, carpenters, people who made furniture, York boat builders, and clerks kept written track of the goods coming into the fort and the furs leaving it. As you can see, the following is the inventory of furs for half of the season. So you can see all the different furs for half of a season of trading. This is dated back to December 31st in 1832 in Fort Edmonton. The clerk kept a detailed list of the furs taken in at the fort over time. Staff at Fort Edmonton Park help visitors see history come alive. This man plays the role of a blacksmith. John Rowand's factor. For 30 years, John Rowand was the chief factor at Fort Edmonton. Rowand wanted to make Fort Edmonton known throughout the land. He built a 3-story chief factor's house. It was the largest building west of York Factory at the time. The large house was carefully constructed. The roof had 3 layers of planks, with the middle layer going a different direction to help keep the building waterproof. It also had glass window panes, a luxury at that time. This is a portrait of John Rowand, which hangs at Fort Edmonton Park today. Visitors to Fort Edmonton Park can tour reconstructed buildings, including John Rowand's house. Louis Humphreyville. Louis Humphreyville. There's a story about how John Rowand and his wife found his wife. It could be said, really, that she found him. One day, Rowand was out riding. His horse reappeared at the fort without its rider. Nobody knew where he went except Louis Humphreyville, who watched as he left the fort. She went searching for him on horseback. Eventually, she found him lying with a broken leg. She made a travois. A travois is 2 poles with a net, skin, or other platform placed across them. used for hauling. She brought him back to the fort, the horses pulling the travois. So as you can see in this image, the travois is this wooden part shown resting on the horse. Paul Kane's Christmas. On December 5th, 1847, Paul Kane arrived at Fort Edmonton. The winter was very cold, reaching as low as minus 45 degrees Celsius. His account tells much about the life in the fort. On Christmas Day, the flag was hoisted, and all appeared in their best and gaudiest style to do honor to the holiday. Towards noon, every chimney gave evidence of being in full blast. Dinner started in the hall of the chief factor's house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Paul Kane sat with John Rowand, as well as several missionaries and clerks. Everybody joined in the fun, and most people danced until midnight. At the head was a large dish of boiled buffalo hump. At the foot smoked a boiled buffalo calf. My pleasing duty was to help a dish of muffle or dried moose nose. So as you can see this picture, this is a painting by Paul Kane. It was a Métis woman that he met at Fort Edmonton. So these two pages 212 and 213, is an interview with Marie-Anne Gabory Leguimaudière. So you can go ahead and read this independently if you would like. That's it for chapter 9. Some things to think about. How was the fur trade important? In what ways did fur traders contribute to what is now Alberta? How do the artifacts help us appreciate Alberta's history and stories? And what is the benefit of learning from present-day people who share information about history?